and open up the agenda. So we're going to take some time to just go through again the whole intent of the CMMC agenda and what it means and what controlled unclassified information is. An overview of the 32 CFR rule, what that means and what's coming and what that impact has on your organization now that it really, again, is a reality. Butch will talk about, and David, around how you can identify gaps you may have and make sure that you are ready to actually comply with this and secure your contracts as it relates to that as well. As many of you have seen, this is going to impact over close to 300,000 providers. So no one's going to escape it. Obviously, there will be those that will have different levels of compliance or levels of CMMC requirements they may have, but everyone's going to have to do something and to comply with this. And then during the session, if there are relevant questions during the presentation, we'll go ahead and take some of those and present those to Butch and David. And of course, at the end of the session, we'll take Q&A as well as offer some complimentary services to you all, should you be interested in them. So with that, Butch, I'm going to turn it over to you to start the presentation. And again, thank you everyone for joining us here today.
All right, thank you, Tom. Okay, CMMC version 2.0, moving at the speed of government. And it is now finally a rule as of December. So what that rule is meant to do is cover confidential, unclassified information. Now, quick history of the rule. This came out of the NIST 800-171 requirement that has been in place since 2017. So that for the defense industry base, they should have been working towards compliance since that date. I wanted to give a quick overview of what CUI is. And you can read from the screen and see here that it's basically a broad brush, okay? From PII to personally identifiable information, SPII, such as Social Security number, proprietary business information, unclassified technical information, all of this information that you usually put into an RFI, an RFP, or an RFQ. Now, in working with many of the businesses we have worked with, what we hear is, I don't handle CUI. I don't store CUI. And you may or may not. However, when the solicitation comes out, the contracting officer is going to designate by requirement the level of CMMC for that contract. Now, whether you think or whether you do or do not handle CUI, quite frankly, it doesn't matter. Okay? The designation is going to be CMMC level 1, CMMC level 2 self-assessed, CMMC level 2 certified, or CMMC level 3. Now, we'll discuss today CMMC level 1, level 2 self-assessed, level 2 certified, but level 3 is for really only a real finite number of defense contractors. Will the government will actually come into your establishment and do comes down to as a DIB-CAC audit. So if you are concerned about level 3, you'll see how to reach us at the end here, and we would prefer a one-on-one conversation with that. So 32, Code for Federal Regulations, Part 170. This is the CMMC version 2 rule. Now, it is still based on the NIST 800, 171, 110 policies and controls. A few of the changes is now the cloud service provider where you store or use now need to meet FedRAMP baseline moderate certification. However, if you're using Azure, Office 0365, AWS, those cloud providers already meet the FedRAMP baseline moderate standards. Also, this requires a defense contractor flow down to subcontractors. So the prime contractor, an official, a senior official with that prime must attest that the subcontractors will meet the CMMC level within the solicitation. You still require a system security plan, self-assessed scored, referenced in the DoD's Suppliers Performance Risk System, or SPRS. Now, as of about a year and a half ago, the NIST 800, 171 required you to have your score in SPRS. Also, there is no waiver process in place today. Okay, so you can beg, borrow, or steal with the contracting officer, but at this point in time, there is no waiver process. This is the law of the land. If your CMMC scope changes due to any infrastructure modifications during the 3 years of your assessment, then you have to do a new assessment on any changes that infrastructure may provide it. That means if you go from AWS to Azure, Azure to AWS, or the like, and any of that changes, you need to do a reassessment to see what that has done, okay? So let's take a look at CMMC Level 1. CMMC Level 1 is a self-assessment, but instead of 17 security requirements, they have narrowed it down to 15. So CMMC Level 1 is not really a heavy lift here. Only 15 controls and policies that you need to implement. You need to do an annual self-assessment to make sure that those 15 security requirements are still in place. A prime senior official needs to do an annual affirmation that their subcontractor is still in compliant. You'll need to do an annual update of the SPRS score. And this is also kind of a change here for Level 1. A plan of action and milestone of any unimplemented controls of those 15s is not allowed. So you'll have those 15 security requirements implemented, but again, it's only 15. All right. Level 2. In Level 2, all 110 policies and controls must be implemented, okay? So the program contracts will determine the CMM Level 2 self-assessment. Self-assessment is literally you going through 110 controls and policies, saying that they are implemented, and this is why and how they are implemented. That is a self-assessment. The second flavor is CMMC Level 2 third party. Now, this is a certification assessment. This is where the third party will come into your organization and ensure by audit and by a standard audit process, ensure that those 110 policies and controls are implemented. Now, for those third parties, those C3 PAOs, they will be entering that system into what is called EMAS. EMAS is kind of a governing system, if you will, for most of the DoD's compliance. So that could be risk management framework, authenticate to operate, the NIST 853, NIST 832, and now for CMMC. Then EMAS will transmit that into SPURS. Your CMMC level 2 assessment, you have to do every 3 years. So once you do it today, you don't have to do it again for 3 years, okay? And that's your self-assessment as well as your certified assessment. Again, a senior prime official needs to affirm that subcontractors do meet and continue to meet the CMMC level on the contract. Now, in selected requirements, and again, this is going to be by the contracting officer, there may or may not be allowed for a plan of action and milestone. Now, the plan of action and milestone is simply designates what controls are not implemented and when they will be implemented. But as you can see here, you need to close out the POAM within 180 days, okay? Now, any unimplemented controls that were implemented in that 180 days needs to be reassessed if you're going through the actual certifications. No security requirement greater than the value of 1 can be on the POAM. So those controls and policies are basically weighted. 1, 3, and 5, okay? Now, so you can see here that no requirement greater than value of 1 can be on the POAM. And none of the following on the POAM. And David, help me out here. You do this every day for a living. Can you talk a little bit about these controls that will not be allowed on the POAM?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Butch. These controls that are specifically referenced here have to specifically deal with the storage and the transmitting of CUI data. So basically for these controls, you have to have these implemented because it's the core and the foundation of how CUI is transmitted, created, or at rest within your system. And the objective here is to ensure that when you are dealing with government information, that all of that government information is safeguarded to a minimum of these controls right here.
So these are the controls that must be implemented. Now, notice the one escort visitors, right? LP3 is a virtual company. We do not have office space. So when we're looking at this type of control or these types of controls or policies, we would simply just put not applicable and why, okay? And that does not go against the assessment. So if a control is not applicable, that's okay. You just need to explain why the control is not applicable.
Like you're saying, Butch, you need the supporting evidence to back up your answer to any particular question that might be on there.
Yeah, that's a good point, Tom, because on all of these controls and all of the policies, you are going to need artifacts and a body of evidence that not only in the system security plan that says this is implemented, but also the body of evidence that shows it is implemented. And this could be a screenshot. David, can you talk a little bit more about what a body of evidence might look like a screenshot of a security control system?
Yeah, absolutely. Typically, what we associate with a body of evidence is an artifact that is attesting or showing proof that the control is implemented based on the control of objectives. Essentially, that would mean if you have multi-factor authentication enabled within your RBAC solution, or let's just say Microsoft Azure, you would have a screenshot showing that that policy has been implemented across your users. You would take a screenshot of that. That would be considered an artifact or a piece of a body of evidence. Subsequently, if you have a policy that regulates specifically on, let's just say, how users are vetted before they're given access to your guys' systems, and that they have the proper roles associated to their job, that document could also be classified as body of evidence.
So Butch, I'm going to just pause for 1 second and take a poll. And some things that it sounds like have not changed, just like you have to do currently, is you're supposed to, or you should have submitted a NIST assessment score as well as an SPRS, a system security plan, correct? And that will continue forward, I believe, with this new initiative, that those that are self-attesting are going to have to at least submit some kind of an attestment score or a piece like that, and then they'll need to update that system security plan as well, correct?
Correct.
So we're just interested in knowing with the folks that are here, have you actually even ever submitted a score? And if so, do you have ways to update that? Because even in those situations, they're only going to allow that to be no more than, I believe, 3 years old, if I'm correct.
Correct. It can only be no older than 3 years old.
That's it.
But again, you should be any type of changes, any work that you have done, right? You want to update your SSP because it does nothing to make you look better in the government's eyes,
Right?
Or in the eyes of your prime.
Exactly. And just as a quick note, we'll leave this open a little bit more, but it looks like a relatively large percentage of the participants here have not even submitted a score. So obviously you should be getting on that now, because you're going to have to do that if you're going to continue to participate in these programs, and you will have to have an SSP done, whether that's, you'll want to investigate how you can get that completed with whoever you're working with on that as well.
So Tom, that's a good point, because the memos have been sent out to all contracting officers. So in the past, they'd check, or maybe they wouldn't check, right? So people were kind of sliding in under the radar. Okay, that's not going to happen. They are now mandatory check into the SPRS system for compliance. Now that's your NIST 800-171 compliance, which, as David knows, we've got contacted with customers that said, hey, can you make us NIST compliance in 30 days? The contract has been awarded. They checked. We weren't in there. Yeah. Under CMMC, mandatory contracting officers must check SPRS for your CMMC level to ensure that level matches the level on the solicitation.
And Butch, with that right there, we have a question in the chat. Will the CMMC requirements be retroactively applied to current projects or contracts, or to new solicitations only?
Again, up to the contracting officer. The way that we perceive it rolling out, it will be to new contracts. However, those contracts could have task orders. They could have additional work orders. They can have additional amendments. Okay. Or they could be, say, basically based on the type of contract it is. It's on something like a SIPR, NIPR, or JWICS type network, right? That we are now going to require it. And hopefully the government gives you some time to be able to go through whatever assessment you need to be within compliance. So the interesting thing that the government has done is to provide estimated cost. Now, I took these estimated costs directly out of a document that if you contact Tom or us, we will be sending out to you. That's only 36 pages of really, really fun reading. And that is the estimated cost. Now, look at the words that they're using. Assessment, assessment, assessment. This is strictly to see where you are at. This cost does not cover any remediation efforts. That would be either on your side, or if you choose to use a company like LP3 to come in and assist you with remediations, it doesn't include that cost, right? This is strictly to have an SSP to be able to take that SSP and POAM and then remediate any controls and policies within that POAM, okay? So the self-assessment, again, relatively low level of effort at about $6,000. I like to round up. As David can attest, we're Marines. We can only do math in our heads when there's a 0, 5, or 10 on the end. Level 2, self-assessment, $33,000. And then the level 2 certification assessment, okay? Now, it's $102,000. However, right, the CPO, C3PAO cost is included in the engagement phases, okay? Which you can see is about, you know, is a pretty big chunk of that. So the auditor should be assisting you in those phases to come up with the assessment. We have found that the RPO, if you are using an RPO like an LP3 to do your self-assessment from beginning to end, right, that RPO should be doing the assessment in a way that is more than acceptable to that auditing party, therefore lowering that $31,000 cost that you see here. Now, having said all this, okay, you are closer than you think. Now, you're going to hear the constant drumbeat from my peers in the industry that's going to tell you, oh my God, the sky is falling, it's going to take you forever, and it's going to be so expensive, and that's why we're going to charge you all this money. But many of you are using as-a-service applications. Perfect example. If you are using Microsoft Azure, if you are using Microsoft O365, SharePoint, Teams, email, storage, David, what's the percentage of controls and policies that they're already implemented by Microsoft?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, most of these cloud providers, since they already have FedRAMP certification, they already have government frameworks that they meet requirements for to work in the FedRAMP space or to work in different specialty spaces. Basically, what you do is you have a reciprocity that comes from their compliance down to your environment. And what I mean by that is if you have, let's say, for example, a specific access control with CMMC and you're using the Microsoft 365 enterprise environment, basically the level of effort for you to be compliant with the control is reduced at about 60%. Since you have reciprocity for the compliance that Microsoft already has, they pass it down to you, and your responsibility is to apply it where it is required or for your business use case. So basically, Microsoft has it there. They are compliant on the back end, and they give you the option to turn it on and configure it with what makes sense for your contract or for your business needs.
Yeah, and so who do you want to pay to just simply go into Microsoft's Compliance Manager, go to CMMC version 2, take those controls and apply them to your system security plan. Do you want to pay, quite frankly, even somebody like us, LP3, hours to do that, when you can simply do it yourself, right? And be that much ahead of the game before you even call someone like us to come in and help you. Now, that actually goes across if you're using GovTribe, Deltek, Salesforce, QuickBooks, right? All of these as a service applications have already crossed this bridge. Okay. So the sky is not falling. If you're using these applications, from 40 to 60% of those controls are already done for you. Thinking if you're just going to achieve level 1 right now, that's only 15, right? So David, help us determine, which controls might they be? How do you get them into your system security plan in an automated fashion? And how do you then track the body of evidence and artifacts that you will need? And maybe talk about some of the automation that they might want to employ.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Basically, when we're going through compliance frameworks and you have a contractual requirement to meet these controls, if you have a contract with the federal government, the best thing that you can do is to employ a GRE tool, something that can manage your compliance, that can bring up your requirements, that can be a central place where you can bring all things control and compliance related into one single spot, so that you can manage and you can see the overall posture and compliance piece within your organization, and as well as identifying gaps or maturity pieces. Such of those tools that we like to use is a tool called SureShield. SureShield is a GRE tool that allows you to import the CMMC framework to give you a overview of all of the controls, what controls are associated to CUI by levels. It also allows you to store documentation, bodies of evidence, policies, processes, and procedures, as they're all directly related to each of those controls, allowing you to get a full picture of each of those compliance pieces that your organization meets per control. From there, you can generate documentation that's required, such as your system security plan and that plan of action and milestone, or what we refer to as your POAM. And basically what you can do in tools like this is you can identify gaps, because the requirement is clearly spelled out for you, so you know what you have to do in order to be compliant with those controls. And if you're not there yet, we call that a gap. And basically from that gap, you're allowed to put this on a POAM item, which then says, hey, this item needs to be controlled. We have done A, B, and C, but we need to do E and F in order to be further compliant, in order to make the complete compliance with that control. And basically you're able to use it as like a project tracker for those compliant pieces. And you're able to say, look, I need to do this and this with this department, and we have a target date of X for compliance for these tools. So it basically consolidates everything, allows you to see it from the lens. Maybe you're a project manager, maybe you're a cybersecurity manager that's controlling this. Whatever you are, it brings everything up to the front and allows you to see your posture status. If you're not compliant, when will you be compliant? And this all basically allows you to do on-demand reporting for any type of updated reporting that the government might ask regarding your compliance with CMMC.
And these
David,
compliance
sorry.
tools, go ahead, Tom.
I'm just going to say, and David, to your point, regardless of what you use, just keep in mind, as you're saying with this program, whether you are self-attesting or whether you are going through an audit, every year you're going to have someone, a senior officer, coming back and either submitting a new assessment and or attesting to that, correct? And so you will want to make sure that you go back and have a system that can see if anything has changed, to make sure you've updated that correctly. before you're going to attest to being in compliance, because it's, you can't have new things come into the environment where you may have been compliant at one point and maybe now you have an issue you need to deal with, right?
That is spot on. Every single one of these, level 1, level 2 self-assessed, level 2 certified, all require an annual assessment, right? And having that tool like SureShield will not only allow you to do it annually, but quite frankly, you can do it weekly, monthly, quarterly, so you can stay up on your cyber posture. So this is not just about compliance, it's about cyber posture. And a few of our customers actually went to their insurance companies for their cyber insurance, showed them that they are compliant to these standards and received a reduced rate. Our customers are using it for differentiators in the commercial market. Okay, so they are saying we adhere to the government standards. Does the other guy? And these tools do not break the bank in any way, shape, or form. Okay, and if an auditor or one of our peers, RPOs, come to you and you ask them, well, how do you track all this? How do you create the SSP? How do you create the POAM? How do you create the artifacts and body of evidence? And they say spreadsheet? Really? Spreadsheets? No. No, if they are not using one of these tools, and like I said, these tools do not break the bank. You'd be surprised about the cost worthiness of these tools. That's a red flag. That's going to be a red flag, right? Plus, you get to be in charge of these tools during the process and moving forward. This is an annual subscription. This is your tool. This is your SSP. You can manage it moving forward without additional expense. Okay. Let's take a look at some of our takeaways. Ladies and gentlemen, version 2 rule is here, and it's here to stay, and it is the law of the land. At this point in time, there's no waiver process. When that solicitation comes out with the CMMC level, either you adhere or you go to the next solicitation. Understand your compliance posture, okay? Like we keep saying, you are closer to compliance than you probably think. We've had customers come to us, they're on Microsoft and they don't have physical offices. That's kind of an easy SSP to put together and know where their posture is. If you haven't started, start now. Everyone has a day job. They didn't just wake up and go, my God, I'm just going to take the next 2 or 3 weeks off and I'm going to do nothing but compliance work, right? This compliance work is going to be an evolutionary process in your day-to-day routine until you achieve compliance. If you have already started, ramp up, get it done. Get it off your plate, move on, okay? And we can't pound this in enough. You're closer than compliance than you think. Don't listen to the continued drum beats, right? Know where you're at. Know where you're at before you even call one of us. And now you're working from a standpoint of data when you're talking to them about the cost of assistance. Those people that came in and say, well, one cost fits all. No, it doesn't, right? They're betting they're going to make tons of money on some people and lose money on the others. No, that's not the way to work as a partnership when you're doing this type of compliance work. use a compliance tool. It's just that simple. These things are not expensive, right? Just a second, I'm going to go in. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. Prime contractors are obligated. If your prime contractor hasn't hit you up, they're going to hit you up. We've had prime contractors that actually wanted to see the SSP. They wanted a screenshot of the SPURS score. We've had prime contractors in the solicitation ask for all SSPs of all of their subs, right? I encourage you, go out to Deltek, go out to GovTribe, go out to sam.gov, type in as a keyword CMMC. Look at some of the requirements that are out there today for CMMC. Now, some of these are large awards, and they're not going to be awarded, until months from now or even years from now. But the CMC requirements are in these solicitations today.
Yep.
All right. How can we help? So we do have a starter package. This is that compliance tool with a little bit of services wrapped around it, so you understand how to use this tool moving forward. And Trevor, help me out here. The starting point at that tool is? He might be on mute. David, do you know?
Yeah, the starting point for the CMMC compliance package, that starting point is doing an assessment of the amount of information you want to put in a SureShield. It's bringing in setting up the SureShield account. It's going through all of the basically how you're going to function, how you're going to use it, how you're going to upload evidence, how you're going to navigate, and then how you're going to track and do your reporting for each of your controls.
And I think that starting point is like $3,950 or $3,995, something like that. So as you can see, you get the package, you get the initial consulting services to kick you off. Now that package is actually going to create your system security plan. You're just going to input the information and it's going to spit out that SSP. It's going to spit out your plan of action and milestones. So both of those documents are done for you, right? It is going to evaluate and actually give you your SPURS entry, right? Now, as part of that offering, after you do all of that, you can come back to LP3, and we're going to give you the level of effort for you to then achieve level 1 and achieve level 2. So we are going to say, based on your self-assessment and based on the unimplemented controls, for our assistance in helping you, here's what the cost is going to be, okay? And each one of these is customized for each individual company. Again, a lot in our peers are just going to give you basically one cost for an all-you-can-eat. But why pay somebody that are pricing off implementation of 80 controls when you only got 10 to do and be done with it? Now, we're also offering for primes to be able to do CMMC and, quite frankly, other compliances as a service. So we actually work with the prime and the flow down to the subs, where an RPO can attest that, yes, the subs are compliant with the CMMC level requested by the prime. We offer these as tailored services, tailored to fit. We'll also take a look at your existing system security plan and your plan of action and milestone. We'll review that, okay? And then based on that review, make recommendations and, again, provide you the customized remediation services so that you can update the SSP and your SPURS. The compliance is AI-enabled body of evidence artifacts and e-mass entry. Okay. So each one of those controls in your system security plan will have a direct link to the artifact and body of evidence that supports it. A lot of these systems will say, well, go search for it on SharePoint. Go search for it in this directory. The artifact is there, but you got to find it. It's not the way to get it done. We are also offering a no obligation collaboration on your company's readiness. Simply either email me, you'll receive our contact information in the mail along with this presentation. We'll set up a call. Let's see where you're at. This is a no BS assessment. It's a no BS call, right? This is where you're at. This is what we think you need to do. We're going to give you enough information to make an informed decision. So, Tom, time for questions.
Yes, and I know that Trevor's been pitching in and helping answer some of the questions here. As Butch mentioned, if you are interested in that no obligation consultation, please go ahead and enter that into the poll questions here as well. They obviously have been doing this for a lot of folks for a number of years and have really helped them make sure that they're ready for this process. Obviously, under their current agreements you have and the requirements you have with NIST. But obviously, if any of you are planning on participating as a supplier going forward, you're going to have to do this. And so I would encourage you to at least take advantage of that consultation call with the folks. I'm going to read one of these questions, and David and Butch and Trevor, you may better understand the specific question here. One of them is, how does CMMC work for those of us working in a tender-based environment rather than executing a FAR-based contract? Now, this company says that they definitely do handle CUI, I mean. They're a freight forwarding provider, and basically asking, is this going to apply to them, do you think?
The answer to that question, if you are working within the defense industry base, right, and you have a DoD contract, basically of any type, CMMC is going to apply to you. Now, it may only be CMMC level 1, right? What we are recommending is, just from your own cybersecurity posture, get the CMMC level 2 self-assessed, okay? Now, CMMC level 2 certified, going through that audit, quite frankly, once you're CMMC level 2 self-assessed, you should be ready for the audit. Unless the government is putting a gun to your head to take that extra expense, and you saw that extra expense is like $60,000 or more. Think of how many billable hours you got to do to get that much profit, right? Unless the government or your prime is putting a gun to your head that says, get a certified audit, you can hold off on that. Talk to your prime, talk to your contracting officer. Back to the original question, if you're doing business with the defense industry or the DoD, CMMC will apply to you. To what level? Contact your contracting officer, talk to them, see what you might be looking at. Tom?
Yeah, and there's a question, I think I can answer this. Does CMMC apply to non-DoD contracts? The answer today is no, but...
Well, that is actually to be determined. DHS is looking heavily at implementing these same standards. I believe so is Treasury. Most of those within the national security arena. So that would be basically the DoD, Treasury, Energy, State, as an example. So this is going to proliferate throughout the federal government at some point in time.
Mhm. Let me see what else we have here. So actually, one of the folks is saying, go ahead and get certified. Certainly, if you are determined that you're going to be at a level 2, you're going to either have to self-attest or get certified with an independent agency. I would encourage, again, maybe to the question, anybody that's here that's planning, that is servicing a DoD contract in one form or fashion or intends to, you should get that process started as soon as possible. And folks from LP3 can help you with that in a very cost-effective manner as well. I'm not.
You don't want to be scrambling at the last minute.
Yeah.
You just don't want to do that. And I can tell you, David, I know he doesn't have a life and he just is all he does for a living. But when they come to us and ask for certification in 30 days, and they're asking for remediation as well, that's tough. You know, sometimes you just got to tell them, no, it's going to take 60, it's going to take 90, right? So start now. Give yourself some leeway. Give your providers some leeway. Tom?
Yeah, I think that's the all the other questions for the most part, I think, have been fielded. Let me just, there's another from Jacob. Well, we need the program office at US Transcom to define the CMMC level somewhere else within the program's regulatory documentation.
I guess I'm not understanding when they say within somewhere else within the documentation. The solicitation should be very clear on the CMMC level. If you go to sam.gov and pull a few of these up, go to the PDF and just do a quick search within that PDF of CMMC. It defines it very clearly. If it is going to be rolled in afterwards, meaning that you have an existing contract and they're going to wish to put this into the existing contract, there should be some type of notifications through the program manager, through your prime, that this is going to be done. Again, best thing you can do is see if you can engage the contracting officer.
And to your point again, if the primes are going to probably be even more diligent these days to make sure that their subs are meeting these requirements, right? Because if I read into that rule as well, they're putting a lot of obligations on the primes to assure that their subs are meeting these requirements as well.
We've actually seen where this has been contested because one of the subcontractors was not NIST compliant, right? And so the contract was contested. The prime, this is where it gets a little interesting, a little sporty, right? Because a lot of primes, especially the big guys, your GDITs, right? Your Parsons, right? Those guys are going to want to secure their supply chain and their ecosystem. So they're just going to come up and maybe just say, we are going to make it a blanket across all of our subcontractors that they meet CMMC level 2 self-assessed, regardless of what the next contract might say, right? Because they have thousands of subcontractors and they don't want to have to go, well, this one is this and this one is that. They'll have a certain level of compliance that the prime wants you to meet. Talk to your prime. Talk to your prime.
Great. And just again, I don't see any other questions. If you have a few more, we got a few more minutes here. I think they've been answered in the Q&A by Trevor or David or myself or you, Butch, live. Again, if you are interested in having folks from LP3 contact you to kind of help get you started, please go ahead and answer in the poll section. Those of you that have said yes, you will get a follow-up contact by people from LP3 to help get that started for you. Everybody will get copies of this presentation as well as the webinar. And so certainly if you need help in the future, please feel free to reach out to us as well. I think there was a question earlier about, now that it's in the review phase, what's the likelihood that this is going to continue forward? And I think it's pretty safe to say, you can speak to it, you're closer to it, Butch, but if you look at what came back, there was not any significant changes to what was last out there. So I think it's safe to say that this is accelerating, and there's obviously good reason for it. Every day you open up the paper or every, look online, there's this entity or that entity getting hacked or attacked, and it's just proliferating with AI as well. So it's not only, good from a compliance perspective, it's ultimately good from just an ultimate safety practice, not just for, our country, but for your businesses as well. So encourage you in one way or the other to make sure you're meeting these requirements.
Absolutely. This is going to be the law of the land. Okay. It is imposed by the Department of Defense. There's an actual executive order that mandates the strengthening of cyber posture within the defense industry base. Most of the major hacks from our adversaries have come through contractors. Okay, so this will be the law of the land. If you do not think it's going to apply to you, if you do not think the CUI applies to you, the solicitation is going to come out with the CMMC level. Either you comply or you do not. It's that simple. But again, don't fall into the fear factor. Okay, don't listen to the drum beats. Find out where you are at. Okay, find out how far you need to go. And if you have 10 or 15 controls, knock out 2 or 3 every month. Great. And then if you start now, you've got time to get there. When that solicitation comes out, you're going to be scrambling and freaking out. Don't do that. You don't have to.
Butch, on that note, just real quick to kind of reiterate what Butch was saying about, is it going to be the law of the land? One of the reasons why we're very confident that it will be is because we've already seen large contractors, primes within the DoD organization that have already been required to go through level 3 CMMC assessments and as well as level 2 third-party audit in order to maintain their contracts. So that is a basis, proof is in the pudding. When you have companies that are required to maintain that, especially large primes, then the further rollout of those requirements are just around the corner.
All right. Well, guys, thank you much for the presentation. Thank you to the audience for joining us here today. We wish you all luck in the year coming, and happy to help in any way that we can to help, make sure that you are able to participate in these agreements and obviously protect your business. So with that, unless there are any more questions, we appreciate the time. And as I mentioned, folks from LP3 will be following up with those of you that have indicated that you would like for them to be contacting you. Everybody will get copies of the presentation. And again, if you're someone that maybe later would like to be contacted, just you'll get regular communications from us, and hope that we can, if not help now, we can help you here in the near future. All the best, and thanks again, guys, for the presentation here today. And with that, we'll go ahead and conclude the session. Thank you.